Hi, I'm Davida. Thank you so much for joining me on my journey towards greater clarity and connection. Today I want to talk with you about this book, Internal Family Systems Therapy. So it's kind of a review, but with more of a personal touch because the book had a big effect on me, and I've been really using it with how I'm thinking about what's going on for myself and when I'm talking to other people. So I'm excited to share this book with you. I'll start with a little bit of a background. Richard Schwartz developed internal family systems therapy, and his background was actually in family therapy. So he was used to working with different individuals, and there's a dynamic that happens between all of the members of the family. And then when one thing shifts, then it's kind of everything shifts. And he applied that model to the individual. So I definitely could relate to this idea that there's all different parts of me, and probably most of us can, that part of us might feel happy at the same time that another part of us feels sad, or that we might have an angry part or a part of us that's really critical of ourselves, and another part of us that's like just encouraging us to take it easy. And there's all these different voices, and what he suggests is that if we trying to shift something with one of the parts, we really need to take the entire system into consideration. And I really appreciated this because I think that everything is contextual. Like even when it gets down to like if something right or something wrong for me or for you, it all depends on the context and what's happening around. And the other place where this comes out really strongly in, it's abbreviated to IFS Therapy, is that he talks a lot about how the therapist needs to be doing their own work. Like the onus is on the therapist to create safety and to earn the client's trust, and to be very aware of how his own parts or her own parts might be getting involved or interfering in the therapy relationship. So context is definitely a big thing here. Richard Sweezy suggests that of all of the different parts of us, and there can be dozens, there are basically three main categories. So the first category is called exiles, and those are parts of us that are abandoned or neglected or were hurt really badly, often when we were really young, and they often feel really young, but it doesn't have to be just when you were young. It could have been a traumatic experience or an abusive relationship when we were older. And those are parts of us that are very vulnerable and hurt. And for some reason, in the moment, they were kind of threatening to overwhelm us with their pain or their grief or whatever it was. And another part of us, and the next category, which are called managers, decided that we can't afford to have the exile running out in the open here, and so kind of shunted them to the side and sent them into exile and tried to stay in control. So managers are the parts of us that try to stay in control, and they are often perfectionistic or perhaps very critical, driving to success, or maybe the opposite actually. Like maybe they could be self-sabotaging in order to make sure that, I never need to face rejection. So I will never ask for a promotion. And that might be a manager part of mine that's speaking up and running that show in order to avoid having the experience of that would be similar to what happened with that exile, or maybe that would trigger that exile to come up, and then I might get overwhelmed by those emotions. So there's the exiles that are young, they feel young anyway, even if they're not necessarily. There's the managers who kind of try to keep things under control. And then life happens. So sometimes the managers can't keep things under control and things slip, and then things might be, an exile who's very hurt or very angry might threaten to surface, and the third kind of part will surface, and that's a firefighter. That's what he calls them. The firefighters, their job is either to soothe the exile or to distract. So often, while managers are very concerned about what they look like, firefighters don't really give a damn at all. Like they will firefighters will engage in all kinds of behaviors that are aimed to distract or soothe. So it might be kind of extreme. It might be like a temper tantrum, or a binging, or drinking, or drug abuse, or there's lots of different things that well, some firefighters could actually be like societally approved. Like it could be more of like a workaholic kind of thing, where of like driving to an extreme. But those are kind of an outline of the basic parts. And a message in this book that I really connected to is that all of the parts are really doing their best to be in service to us. They're all trying to help us out. And many of them have gotten stuck in patterns and in behaviors and habits that are not really serving us, but that's really what they want. So if we can approach them with compassion and understanding and really get them, then they can also be shifted, kind of like in family therapy, to have a different role in our internal family system that will be more healthful for us right now. And so who's running the show? Well, if things are out of whack, then it could be a manager or a firefighter or an exile. But if we are, I guess the goal of the therapy is to put us in touch, or keep us in touch with ourselves. It's kind of like our higher self, the part of us that can see all of this from above and is really characterized by compassion and curiosity, creativity, the interest in connection, courage. So it's kind of like some of the words of like what I'm trying to be all about here. It's about being in connection with ourselves, with a capital S. And ourself can help our parts find the roles that really are servicing us and not harming us. I'm gonna try to give an example. Let's say I work really hard. Actually, this is a great example. I just have had a ton of orders in the studio. It was just Christmas season and a lot of gifts were ordered, and we're understaffed because some of our employees who were on unpaid leave because of Corona, one of them moved, one of them started studying, so we only had one person working with us part-time, and my sister was up north, and so I was really working very long hours in the studio to try to get all those orders out. A big part of that was just wanting to give good service and be there for our customers and be developing our studio as we're growing, and really appreciating that and being willing to go the extra mile in order to make things flow. But also part of that was wanting to be honest here, wanting to get my husband's appreciation for what a good job I'm doing in the studio. Because last year he was a part of the studio and he was really good at managing, and this year he wasn't around so much, and I started managing, and I see that there are places where I'm not as good as him in that role, and so trying to prove myself there. And I noticed that myself was one time, it was really crazy, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning and I was working, and I heard myself, like this voice in my head saying, you're doing a terrible job. And I was just like, I'm working really hard here, and where is that voice coming from? And it really wasn't anybody else's voice, it was my own voice. And I realized, and having read this book was helpful to me to realize that this was a part of me that is very, very critical. And if I dig down and listen to it with compassion from my higher self, then I can see that this is a part of me that really wants to be taken care of. So on the one hand, it sounds like surface-wise that it wants me to like work even harder and do an even better job. But once I dug down a little bit, I could really see that it was protecting me from this really vulnerable, I would say that it was a manager that was protecting me from this very vulnerable exile that just wants to be taken care of. And kind of like the sadness that I can feel in that place is really powerful. And so if I'm running and working, then I'm not feeling that. And when I can stop, and breathe, then there's space for me to feel that. And the reason that I might want to go there, even though it hurts, would because that's how I can bring healing there. There's a part of me that wants to be taken care of, and I mean, who's better to take care of it than me? And it's, I guess, in that way, this book was an invitation to me to be willing to slow down and listen to my parts, the parts of myself, that in a way that would let me feel things that might be more uncomfortable, but also like integrate them and welcome them home, and then I can be a bigger and wiser person, which, you know, brings me to greater clarity and connection, and it takes a lot of courage. So IFS therapy sounds really cool. It's probably a work in progress for everybody, the therapists included, and I appreciate the way that it was put out in the book as such. And thank you so much for joining me. I didn't really expect the video to go there, but I'm glad that it did, and I look forward to seeing you next time. If you like this video, please hit like, subscribe to my channel. Would really like to be growing a community around these principles, and I would love to have you join.